Opening with my trailer, this product within my cross-media marketing package for the psychological drama B largely develops the narrative conventions discussed by Todorov. The trailer opens at a stage in the narrative best categorised as disruption. Trailers in general typically open with the first narrative stage, equilibrium. However, films of my subgenre, such as Memento, Requiem for a Dream and The Butterfly Effect, all begin with a disruption, and their narrative structures often develop into a further disruption. My trailer follows an unreliable narrative, conventional of films such as Donnie Darko. Although there is stray from Todorov's proposed structure, there is also compliance in that these films do include recognition as well as an attempt to repair. Though the non-linear structure of the trailer dissects each stage of the film and disrupts the true narrative, the stage of recognition has been featured within my trailer and is first seen in the eyeline match sequence, just following the midway point of the trailer. This recognition of the further disturbance, but also of the difficulties in repairing this disturbance, lead well into Todorov's fourth stage, the attempt to repair, though only a glimpse of this stage is present within my trailer, for I wanted to ensure the audience were left with the enigma of how the protagonist will rid herself of the antagonist's hold. This stage is interspersed as a dramatic cutaway at the opening of the protagonist's introductory monologue in a long two-shot at a canted angle. Psychological dramas are rarely a perfect fit for Todorov's conventional narrative structure, as they often begin with an already troubled character that encounters a further disturbance, much like my own, and so in this way my main product is conventionally unconventional. In terms of representation, I complied with convention in my presentation of youths, for particularly the protagonist, but also the antagonist of my film fits gold stereotypical representation of youths being nihilistic. This is connoted throughout the trailer, but is especially well illustrated in the entirely protagonist-narrated opening sequence, through shots such as the mid-close-up shot with a tilt motion of her putting on her tights, the action itself appearing meaningless and dull, but the mid-close-up also captures an unfinished painting, this mise-en-scene conveying a lack of determination and care, the painting's content itself adding to this gloomy tone. The sound throughout the sequence further constructs the stereotype of youth, both in emotionless tone of voice the girl speaks in and through what she says, an example being, "and do it all over again each day," highlighting the repetition and insignificance of her life. I chose to include this conventional form of youth within my trailer as I felt it would be something my target audience would be able to relate to, having just recently experienced my protagonist's age. They are likely to have felt similar or had friends who felt nihilistic, or may even be feeling this way currently, and so through this portrayal of the protagonist they are able to empathise with her, and possibly even fulfil McCrail's conventional uses and gratification theory in that their personal identity is being addressed and defined. Continuing with age, I also included conventional adult figures of authority, the main one within the trailer being the psychiatrist character. This female character embodies the authoritative representation of adult age in this mid-close-up two-shot, where she is the only one who can directly be seen in the shot, and her voice in the diegetic sound is the only voice to be heard in the shot, establishing her power and directing the audience's focus to her. The mise-en-scene of her large black chair, smart bob hairstyle and glasses further contribute to this representation, the glasses making her appear intelligent. I use this conventional representation of authority in adult-teen dynamics, so the audience would be able to understand the situation through familiarity. Furthermore, choosing to make the authority figure a psychiatrist also means I am working within the conventions of my genre. The therapist character is very much so a syntactic element of psychological dramas, though parents or teachers are more conventionally represented as authority figures in general media. This means this character also enables a generic likeness with other films within the genre, such as Trance, A Beautiful Mind and Donnie Darko, and so provides a richer insight into whether the audience will find this film enjoyable. I did, however, challenge convention in my representation of females across the characters, the best example being in the mid-two shot of the protagonist's parents. Through the camera's panning to make the shot a one-shot of the mother, the diegetic sound of her furious voice confronting the male, and the mise-en-scene of the pair's actions, her pointing a finger viciously and his flinching, she most definitely appears an unconventionally strong and positive representation of the gender. The male's unconventionally weak appearance only strengthens her powerful representation and provides a dynamic context to define her power. I chose to create a theme of strong females running throughout my trailer, for I feel they have been unfairly underrepresented or represented in a trivial manner in the media, and also because though my target audience includes both males and females, there is a slight gender focus on females. Through such unconventionally positive representations, my target audience is provided a range of refreshing female characters to idolise as role models, fitting with McQuail's point again of media-defining personal identity. I complied considerably to the conventions of cinematography of both the medium and the genre I am working in that I employed a host of established shots and movements, particularly focusing on the use of mid-shots and mid-close-ups, conventional of psychological dramas and necessary due to my dialogue-driven selection of shots. That being said, though I did use the conventions of cinematography, I did so to an extent. In the first shot, for instance, I developed convention in that I altered the traditional framing of a close-up, in that the character within the shot isn't central in the frame, and the camera is positioned to only include her lips and neck, whereas conventionally all of the character's facial features and none or very little of her neck would be framed within this shot. I developed the conventions surrounding this shot for I wanted to instantly connote there was some sort of disturbance, and also because I felt renovating this shot would be appreciated by my art enthusiast target audience. Another example of developed cinematographic conventions is in the mid-free shot table scene on several levels. Firstly, 3 shots are not as common a shot type as 1 or 2 shots, and so this shot provides the audience with multiple relationships to consider. Additionally, dinner table scenes and shots including more than one person are often used to convey unity and a bond between the in-shot characters, but I've reversed this convention to show the decay of the family relationship shown in the mise-en-scene of the characters' actions, for none of them speak or look up from their bowls. I developed this convention because I wanted the audience to be intrigued and attentive, and also because through flipping the familiar, a stronger reaction to the shot is likely to result. I was inspired after having analysed Stoker's package to construct this shot, for that trailer also includes an uncomfortable free shot at a dinner table, though shot at an angle rather than uncomfortably head-on. Finally, I also constructed a theme of frames within this element, which can be seen continuously throughout the trailer due to a carefully constructed use of mise-en-scene, location, and consideration to composition. This repeated use of frames within shots was inspired by Ford's use of the technique within the searches. There was a relatively unconventional concept in cinematography and was decided upon for I feel it aids the construction of one of the main narrative themes of what is real and what only appears to be real through this subtle framing within the shots. Moving on to editing, I followed convention to an extent in that I established a relatively standard pace, which I then slowly increased, building up to a montage of mini-second clips at the end of the trailer, which is an entirely standard editing structure of the medium. I also used typical editing forms of which my audience will be familiar with, for instance using cuts to ensure continuity and fades to further define particular sections from the last, for this is a longer edit and at the end of the trailer so that it didn't suddenly conclude, but rather it was smoothed out and pronounced. That being said, I also developed convention by using some established but less common edit types, the most frequently used being the jump cut discontinuity edit. I used this cut several times throughout the trailer for different effects, one of them being to create a more dramatic shot sequence, as seen in the jump cut from the 3 paintings to a shot of the painting appearing to shift their eyes and cry, in the exact same composition. The jump cut was further enhanced and better pronounced with a flash transition to white between the 2 shots, and so the use of this unconventional discontinuity editing makes for very sudden and unexpected viewing that I hope will leave my audience attentive. Similarly, I used this discontinuity editing later on to continue the theme of reality being questioned as discussed earlier, for I used several jump cuts on the mid-2 shot door sequence. The first instance cuts further into the shot, making the protagonist's movements appear to have jolted a little to create a feeling of disturbance, but more noticeably, the antagonist has disappeared with the edit. The second and third uses of a jump cut in the sequence reintroduce her, and then again rid her of the shot, the protagonist's unawareness to this creating a slight feeling of dramatic irony and unease throughout the sequence, and so I have constructed a tone and emotive effect through the use of my editing, conventional of the genre I am working in, but in an original and relatively unconventional manner. I finally used this less conventional edit on the mid-long 2-shot sequence between the protagonist and antagonist, which was inspired by a jump cut sequence in the recent British independent film Ginger and Rosa, to create the feeling of time passing and portray the development of the pair's relationship. I developed conventions surrounding the institution, for though I did include the conventional institution logo shots and billing block, and I placed the institutional logo shots together, in terms of structure I positioned my institutional logos unconventionally late in the trailer. I developed this convention due to the independent production company I used in conjunction with Fox Searchlight, as the independent institutional credits are not a selling point of my film, so there is no urgency to showcase them. I chose to position the logos unconventionally late, at around 30 seconds into my main product also, to further define sections of the trailer. The logos act as neutral shots, easing the transition from a sequence dominated by uninterrupted narration, focusing on the depiction of the protagonist's dull, dreary life, to one with a much more infrequent use of narration, from multiple voices, and a broad developing of the narrative presented. Furthermore, in the introductory sequence, I made sure to hide the protagonist so that her face is not in full view at any one moment, to construct a slight enigma of the character, a conventional persuasion ploy, and following the sequence, the girl's face is shown directly. Without the unconventional positioning of institutional logos at this point in the trailer between the two sequences, these two sections would remain undefined from one another, and the protagonist's face being hidden would be lost without this neutral conclusion to the sequence. I developed the convention of a black background behind my billing block by substituting it for a Photoshop manipulated dark leafy shot. I developed this convention as I felt the black background has become such a strong convention of this element that the billing block as a whole goes entirely unrecognised. By using an alternative background, particularly a patterned one, I feel I may be more likely to catch my audience's eye, which will give the standardised element a purpose beyond professional appearance. I ensured the background image was dark so as not to stray too radically from this convention, and also so that the background image did not overpower the billing block itself. That being said, my billing block did directly comply to some conventions. For instance, in layout, I made sure to use the choppy zigzag style of each line being a noticeably different width to the next. Continuing with conventions of my billing block, in relation to typography, this element is very typical, for I use the highly condensed sans serif steel tongs. I followed typography conventions on this element to ensure my audience was able to efficiently recognise the element, and also to ensure all the necessary text fit. The most frequently used text within my trailer was a standard serif conventional, particularly of films within the drama genre, or those which are period set, and I use this font to create a generic likeness with films of both of these categories, as well as to make my film appear both more serious and traditional in at least style. I also made use of a conventional sans serif on less dominant features, such as the caption "A film by Megan Ariana," and institution citing on review quote shots. I included this font alongside the serif for the variation makes the text more visually interesting, as well as allowing me to define particular sections of the text. I developed convention on my feature typography by using a curving handwritten script, which is seen exclusively on my film title, B, and the B within the website address beneath the billing block, the rare use of such an unconventional typeface making for an iconic brand. In application of my chosen typefaces, I conventionally have remained very consistent in that I've used the same font of the same size on the same micro elements, an example of this being the sans serif on the citing Clash magazine being repeated on the citing Little White Lies. I made sure to keep a typical application to support the professional presentation of my product, as well as to aid the audience in recognizing particular micro elements more efficiently, allowing them to make a quicker decision as to whether they wish to read them or not. In conjunction with my chosen typefaces, I used two tones of the same shade of subdued green, a pastel sage and a darker olive. I use these variations of the same shades to again distinguish different parts of the text. The sections I wanted to appear more prominent in the lighter pastel shade, as it was more contrasting with the consistent leafy background used on the text shots. I was influenced by the marketing campaign for Stoker I analysed in choosing these particular colours, though a deep blue is more conventional of psychological dramas, examples being within the colour schemes of Requiem for a Dream and Donnie Darko. Furthermore, my strict use of these two moderately unconventional shades throughout the entire product created a stronger house style, which would aid the professional appearance of my product to an audience, as well as making my product appear more distinct, memorable, and iconic. In terms of genre conventions within my trailer, I've used a great deal of both semantic and syntactic elements of psychological dramas, and that I created a strong theme of visual communication through paintings and photography. As I discussed within my planning, I discovered visual and permanent forms of communication, such as letters used within Stoker. are fundamental elements to the genre to ensure a clearer portrayal of what is often a more confusing and complex narrative. The props of the three eye paintings are an example of where I have applied this semantic element, which, due to the jump cut sequence, is made to appear like a hallucination, making this also an example of syntactic elements of psychological dramas, for conventionally they visually portray an altered reality the main character is experiencing. This particular example was inspired by a memorable shot in the psychological drama Black Swan. Similarly, I took inspiration from Donnie Darko's infamous "They Made Me Do It" graffiti in the mid-close-up one-shot by the scrawled cross lockers to again support the narrative's unravelling. The short words inexplicit as to who may have done what to be called evil and a liar, creating an enigma that will make viewing the film more appealing. I used conventional mise-en-scene of particularly dramas and period-set dramas in the construction of the theme of traditional jewellery seen throughout my three products. The prop of the protagonist's bee necklace is made a part of the film's iconography in the trailer through the protagonist's consistent wearing of it and the frequent use of mid-shots and close-up that draw attention to it. This emphasis also seen in period drama Belle. The inclusion of this semantic element of dramas creates a generic likeness of films within the drama genre, which will hopefully increase the interested audiences of my psychological drama, for this is somewhat undefined as a hybrid or subgenre of thriller, but also of genre. Syntactically and referring back to cinematography, I also made use of a bird's eye mid-close-up one-shot, which has become a very conventional of the genre shot, for it not only isolates the character, but also makes them appear very small and vulnerable. This shot type, used also in Jacob's Ladder for similar effect, is somewhat of a rarity and unconventional in film trailers as a whole, due to the extreme angle, yet is very much in keeping with the genre I am working in, and so can be said to again be an example of my trailer being unconventionally conventional. Lastly, moving on to sound, I complied to the convention of trailers in general, and that I included the sound of a backing track within my trailer, a convention I've seen broken very few times in the medium. I carefully selected a minimalistic soundtrack, conventional of British independent films, and more specifically, I chose to use a somewhat unconventional, simplistic piano piece, similar to other British independents such as Love Tomorrow and my analysed campaign, Stoker. I developed this general convention for I wanted to clearly connote to the audience my film's independent production model, and so, though I was developing overall conventions, I was again conventional to the particular art house style I was trying to create. This redefining of my film's model through the chosen soundtrack allows the audience a greater understanding of the film, and so whether they would enjoy B. The soundtrack makes use of minor keys and has a very melancholic tone to it, enhancing the serious and dark tone of the trailer content. I also introduced several disturbing shorter soundtracks at particular points of the trailer, such as when the mid-shot of the three paintings jump cuts to them appearing to move and cry, to further unnerve the audience. I again introduced another soundtrack as the tired and deranged-looking protagonist smiles widely and says, "I made a friend." In this instance, both non-diegetic and diegetic forms of sound are used to exaggerate the eerie visuals of the shot, as well as in the telling of narrative. Placement of a dark sound effect conveying the beginning of a further disturbance caused by the protagonist having made a friend. This layering of soundtracks is somewhat conventional of trailers, for I have discovered that the majority at least alter the soundtrack slightly to either ensure the audio of the product remains interesting enough through variation, or to introduce a secondary mood within the trailer. In addition to the soundtrack, I feel the unconventionally large amount of narration, seen also in the trailer for the psychological drama Fight Club, and conventional usage of contrapuntal sound was crucial to the clear presentation to the audience both of the film's narrative and tone. For instance, the film's complex storyline is connoted in as few as 3 particular utterances used as narration. "No one loves you like I do," "She's taking over my life," and "She's not real," spoken by the antagonist, protagonist, and mother character. I chose to use the main character's voice as the predominant narrator, for I wanted to establish her with the audience, but I also featured other characters' voices as narrators within the trailer, similarly to Memento, to ensure my audience did not grow bored and were presented with several voices to keep their attention. I noticed from my research around the medium, the convention of a deep male voiceover, heard in trailers such as Dead Ringers, 1988, has become somewhat archaic, and so I actively followed the convention's development in that I avoided this booming voiceover to ensure my product, even though there is a period-style theme within, seems fresh and current, familiar to the young 18 to 26-year-old audience of whom I am primarily targeting. I also made use of non-diegetic sound effects where appropriate, such as the pinch sound effect in the mid-close-up 2 shot and the gritty drag sound effect introduced as the protagonist wraps her hands around the cricket bat and drags it on the floor. This conventional, only when relevant usage of non-diegetic sound effects was used to add more force to the visual mise-en-scene of the actions and performance put forth to the audience in order to create a stronger impression.